Welcome to this special edition of Soulfire TV with tips, tools, and resources for your success as a soulpreneur. Today's episode is our very first Soulpreneur session, where I'll be interviewing entrepreneurs that have a powerful message about how we can live more purposefully, passionately, and profitably. Now, today's guest is very dear to me, my goddess sister, Sofia Alvim. She is a professional organizer, a writer for the Huffington Post, a life coach, and the founder of A Life Uncluttered, as well as Contemporary Goddess. You're going to love how we dive into how clutter can potentially block your business from growth, different forms of clutter, because it is not just piles of paper and clothes, and some simple steps you can take right now to unclutter your mind and space. So let's dive in. So welcome, Sofia. I am so excited to dive into this topic with you. So I'd love to hear from you a little bit more. I know we described in the intro a bit about what you do, but I'd love to hear more about how you would describe what you do.
Thank you, Laura. I'm really excited to be here. So what I do is I am a professional organizer and a life coach, and I basically help people regain the sweetness of life by letting go of clutter. And when I say clutter, it's a very big topic because there are so many things that I have discovered throughout my work with clients for the last 10 years that can be considered clutter. I take a holistic approach because I found that that's the most effective and long lasting when approaching this, process. And, the life coaching component goes hand in hand with it because it's a very cathartic, therapeutic process in itself. And, life coaching lends itself to that. So.
Yeah, I'd love to know a little more about what you mean by holistic approach. A lot of people are talking about holistic approach to eating and life and all this stuff. So what do you mean by that?
Well, in this industry, what I consider I would consider myself to be different in that there are a lot of organizers and, magazines and books and tips and newsletters and blogs about how to have everything ultra organized and what I call Pinterest perfect. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that because at the end of the day, I love beauty and order and I like things to look a specific way. But my approach is holistic because of the fact that I consider when I'm working with a client, I consider everything that is going on in their life and how each of those parts is affecting their life and showing up as clutter or blocking them in some other way. So they may, have a lot of mental clutter going on, lots of ideas, lots of things stuck, not moving forward, and their laundry room may be spotless. But those ideas that are not being written down or, followed through on or whatnot, those ideas are not clutter, but the fact that they're all in a jumble is what creates the clutter. And so those, they could be affecting the way somebody eats if they have all the things that they have in their mind that they need to go buy at the grocery store and are not eating, wisely because of the fact that they can't get that part of their life together. So it's like it all spills into another area. And so it's holistic in that you cannot look at just the stuff. You have to look at why the stuff is there. What is the stuff representing? What is it stopping you from doing? What is it holding space for? And, if you're going to ask me to come and organize your shoe closet, that's not really my thing. Like I have to get to organize your shoe closet from a different angle. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Awesome. Like yeah. I'm gonna get in there. I'm really gonna get in there.
Yeah. So you're not just gonna let somebody like come to you and say, okay, I have a messy room, like come help me with it. Like it's gonna go beyond that.
Right. And a lot of people will say, oh, I'm messy, I'm lazy. Okay. No, you're not messy or lazy. You may have a procrastinating, habit or pattern. And where that comes from is that when you're surrounded by clutter, you can't help but not have energy. You can't help but feel lethargic. You can't help but not want to do anything to deal with it because in some cases, it's largely overwhelming to just even think about getting it done and then not knowing what to do to get it done. And having no energy to do it. That's what clutter does. It just sucks the life out of you, you know, and the more that you have and the more persistent it is, the more that is going to exist in other areas of your life. So it's really not, let's just look at your shoe closet. I'm like, okay, let's look at how this is really affecting you, is that you can't get dressed every day. And you probably reach for the shoes that are easiest to get to and not the ones you would really want to wear with that outfit. And that in turn will parlay into you walking out of the door and not feeling like you. That makes sense?
Yeah. So it definitely goes a lot deeper. So I know we've talked a little bit more about clutter. We met through an amazing spiritual sisterhood, and we were talking about clutter in there. So I'd love for you to talk about what we were talking about, like what is clutter, basically.
So it's interesting that you asked that, because I'm actually about to publish an article on HuffPost that's called "The Real Definition of Clutter." So I'm going to give you the scoop on it. So basically, clutter to me is anything that is stagnant, anything that is broken, anything that needs repair, anything that is overwhelming or too big, anything that's in a pile, anything that's incomplete, anything that basically brings you the anxiety in that pit of your stomach. It's like you look at it and you just go, ugh. That's clutter. You know, it's not just in your space. It's, you know, in your mind, it's in your emotions. You know, there's spiritual clutter. You know, spiritual clutter is, you know, a little bit deeper than all of these, but they all go hand in hand together. You know, spiritual clutter is, I'm not doing the things that are, you know, fulfilling my purpose, not putting me on the path that I'm supposed to be on, even if you don't know what that path is, you know, that you just keep doing things for the sake of doing them and saying yes for the wrong reasons. I mean, that right there is, you're not in alignment with something, and you cannot be in alignment when you have clutter. You just can't. From a feng shui perspective, it would be stagnant chi. You know, that clutter will accumulate stagnant chi, and that stagnant chi will then magnify and exist in other areas of your life.
So my question now that came to me when you were talking was, is the physical clutter the only avenue to kind of clear that up? Is it the easiest? Like, is that the first thing that you do with clients is like, okay, like let's clean your space and then everything else will sort of air out? Or how does that work?
It depends on what kind of client I'm working with. So if I'm working with a person that I'm working with in person, the space is usually the first area that we work on, because it's the one that's going to have the most impact the fastest. However, there are some people who I work with online where we go around with their Skype camera and, you know, on their phone or their computer or their iPad, and they'll take me around and we do the space organizing that way as well. But usually it starts off with, let's talk about what is the clutter that's going on in your life? How's it affecting you? Where is that showing up in your life besides your space? And then we kind of prioritize. So with each client, it's different, but the majority of the clients that I've worked with, we start with their space because it is the fastest way to get change going. And there are people that I say this to most everybody, but sometimes you work on your outside first so that then you can work on the inside. And sometimes you work on your insides first so that you can change the outside. And so it really depends on the person. I can't give you a one-size-fits-all answer. But yeah.
For somebody watching or listening to this episode right now, like, and they are feeling overwhelmed, whether they resonated with like, oh my God, I have a million ideas, which by the way, like for anybody watching and listening, I am a recovering pack rat. That's what
I am too. I wasn't born this way.
I'd love to hear more about your story. And yeah, so I totally am like a recovering pack rat. Like I'm looking at it, you're like, oh, piles. And I'm like, oh, pile. And all the ideas, like I resonate with all that. So if you're watching and listening, like, don't feel bad. I'm in the same.
Yeah, no, don't feel bad.
So what is something that you recommend maybe that they do or don't do, like as their next step?
is their next step, what I recommend them doing is actually taking a look and surveying where they deem that there is clutter in their life based on some of the points that I've covered. You know, anything broken, anything incomplete, anything that's overwhelming. I mean, if you open a cabinet or a drawer and the stuff is like coming at you, that's clutter, you know? Yeah. Collections can be clutter, even if they're all neatly organized. What if you have all these things and you don't use them? So what I recommend they do is actually get real, have a come to Jesus talk with yourself, and do not judge yourself, because what I tell people is the fact that you think that you're messy or lazy is not a direct representation of you, and it's actually not the truth. It's just what the clutter does, and it's how it makes you feel. So first of all, no judgment. Be gentle with yourself. Second of all, go look for the clutter. Go find it. If it's not obvious, think about, do I have clutter in my financial life? Do I have clutter in my emotional life? Do I have toxic relationships with people? You know, is my junk drawer a junk drawer in 5 different places? You know what I'm saying? Like there could be clutter in your car, in your purse, in your briefcase. I mean, there are so many spots in which you can look for it. So look for it. And then think about what is not working well right now in your life that doesn't have anything to do with the clutter, and just write it down. And then in another column, write down what is working well. When you start to look at the things that are not working well versus the things that are working well, see how the column in which things are working well could be enhanced. How can that be enhanced? By getting uncluttered. Because you're not going to say, oh, it's not working well because I'm uncluttered and I'm lazy and I'm messy. That's not what we're after. What you're looking for is how to enhance what's already flowing so that you can create more flow, more space, feeling refreshed, feeling open, feeling available to receive whatever wants to come into your life. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's possessions or energy or friends or clients or whatever. Taking stock of what's not working, it will start to shift the why you want to do this process. Why do you want to get uncluttered? What is your motivation behind it? Because if you just go because you want it to look neat, it's not going to stay that way, most likely. And there's this big, you know, following around the KonMari method and the Japanese art of decluttering. And I love the fact that this book has brought so much attention to this topic, because people are starting to think of things in a different light. And just, you know, there's Facebook groups about, you know, these parties where these people just put on there, like, we're going to do this weekend. And I did this and we did the kitchen and we folded all the t-shirts like that. Now, I'm not as strict about the folding, but the general premise of it is you don't need to have things in your life that don't suit you. So what I tell people is that clutter is getting in the way of you being more you. You're not going to get rid of things to go get new things, more things. You're not going to go to accumulate. What you're doing is trying to excavate more of who you are by letting the clutter go, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yeah. I like that a lot. So I'd love to hear more about your story, because like you said, you weren't always this way.
Right.
So just tell us about
how did I get into this?
Yeah.
It's actually a really interesting story. So I'm about to be 37, and I have been working since I was 15. And the first 12, 13 years of my professional life, I worked for very disorganized, brilliant entrepreneurs. Like, it was my job to sit there and be their right-hand person so they could go out and sell and get clients and produce. And they could not deal with the details. And it was fascinating to me to see, like, you know, the absent-minded professor type. Like, that's the kind of person I worked for, like in 3 or 4 different jobs. And I kept getting them so organized that at the end of the 2 or 3 years that I'd worked for them, it was like, okay, all the systems are created, everything's flowing good. Now you just need somebody to maintain it, and that's not going to be me. So I would move on to the next thing. So I started that way. But as a child, I was extremely, extremely attached to my belongings. I grew up, I was raised by a single mother, and I think as a byproduct of not having had a second parent, a father, I would not let anybody, not my mother, not anybody, take anything away from me. So I just held on to my stuff. And then being a Cancer, which I am, so sentimental, and just, my God, there was a memory with every little trinket and every little piece of paper and every little ribbon, and just, I mean, it was exhausting. Mm-hmm. So I remember my mother just, getting frustrated with me because she could not encourage me enough to keep my space clean. And I didn't for years. And then it was about 97, 96, 97, I was about 17 or 18. I read a book about feng shui, and I was like, oh my God. I can change my life by arranging my furniture this way? So I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And then it says, but, you cannot feng shui until you are uncluttered. Because that right there is you're creating feng shui cures with stagnant energy and stagnant chi, and that does not work. So you have to clean the slate, and then you apply the cures. So, I mean, I didn't really get it, but I had a feng shui person come into my bedroom. It's what I could afford at the time. I was like, this is my space. You live at home. And she feng shuied my little tiny bedroom. And boy, the next year, my mom would come home and find me on the floor with all the things that I was purging. And she goes, what have you done with my daughter? What has gotten into you? Because I just wouldn't stop. I, had always loved containers and cute boxes, but this was like beyond the containers. And that's something else I need to mention is you can get all the containers you want, but you have to let the clutter go first and organize second. Otherwise it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. So don't get any containers until you've purged everything that you're not keeping. So cut to, being dissatisfied with working in corporate America after, a number of years. I got laid off from my job, and I was like, okay, universe, I have no clue what to do here, but I know I cannot go work in another office. And I really didn't know what to do. I was kind of filling in for a receptionist at a Pilates studio and ended up organizing this woman's office. And I just kept seeing how much her business kept shifting because of it. And I was like, okay. And, my friends who knew me were like, you should be a professional organizer. You're so good at this. And I'm like, oh my God, owning a business has got to be the biggest headache ever. I want to get my paycheck at the end of every week. I mean, I just didn't even give two thoughts about it. And then one day, one of the ladies in the Pilates studio said, hey, I have a Pilates client and she wants to know if you have time to take on another client. And I'm like, take on another client? I was like, wow, is that what I do? Do I take on clients? And it was literally like one of those ridiculous, like light bulb, like hello moments where like, oh, I don't need to get a job. I need to start a business. Yeah. And within 3 months, I had a NAPO membership, which is the National Association of Professional Organizers. And 2 months later, I had a website, and it's been 10 years. So Here I am. Yeah.
That's amazing.
I've seen it all.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my God. I have so many questions. So quickly, do you have what's the craziest story if you're allowed to share, I guess?
Yeah. She actually ended up never being my client. So I went into, this is probably about 6-7 years ago. I went into a woman's home. It was an apartment. She had 3 cats, and she was a hoarder. She was living in the middle of her stuff, and she had asthma problems and just, had stuff everywhere and couldn't breathe. I suspect because of the level of dust and dirt that, gets accumulated by not, I mean, this is like the extreme case that you see on hoarders. So that's my craziest, but she booked a bunch of appointments and was in too much fear, I suspect, to start, and canceled them right before. And I can probably guarantee you that person is still not done anything about it. It is something that I've found is that when people suffer trauma or, wounds early on in childhood, some more traumatic than others, they stop feeling safe relating to people. And so they start feeling safe relating to their things because their things will never hurt them, and their things will never disappoint them, and their things will always be there and, not hurt their feelings. So that is a more intricate process that requires therapy and a team and, more extreme measures. I have a lovely client who has become a friend, had a 5,000 square foot house and hadn't gone through anything in 20 years. And I was there for quite a while. So it took a while to go through everything. And at first, people are very scared to have somebody they don't know in their home. It's, showing me all of their stuff, all of their vulnerable spots. I take it very seriously because it's hard. It's very hard for a person to just, you're going to see all my mess.
Yeah.
And you might see more mess than I want you to see. And then I let people in my life who know me better than you see.
Yeah.
So, I take that very seriously, and I try my best to put people at ease and let them know, like, okay, we're not here to judge. We're not here to shame. We're just here to fix it, get you a solution, and get you moving forward. So the most extreme case would have been the first large client that I had was that one. And, in feng shui, they talk about how, the stagnant chi can affect electronics. So I remember, we were working on this lady's office, and when we were done with the office, all of the machines that she had in there that worked stopped working because we unearthed so much stuff, and it was just so heavy. That office had been so heavy for so long that I think she had 3 fax machines and only one of them worked, and, just things that didn't suit anymore. Which were, thank God were considered clutter, but they were things that just weren't working. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, it does. So I'd love to dive a little bit more into, you work with some business owners. I don't know if you work primarily with business owners. So most people who are listening are probably either interested in starting a business or they already are in business.
Right.
So do you have any maybe examples, stories of like how this can really affect your business? How doing some decluttering can help?
Right. So, if you're starting a business or already have a business, all about branding, right? So you have a brand, you have a ship, you're leading something, you're either selling something or you're guiding somebody to do something. And you cannot be the best version of you while you are surrounded by clutter. So you will serve people more because you will be more yourself by taking on this process. And things that you do not expect to shift in your business will shift because you do this. You may think, I'll walk into my office and I'll know where to put my coffee cup and I'll know where to find my staples. And yes, that will happen automatically. But there is the what's the word I'm looking for? The subconscious benefit of getting uncluttered and organized, which is that you get clear. And when you get clear, you create. And when you create, magic happens. You know this. You are a soul sparking coach, right?
Yes.
So what you do, you ignite people. So what I want to tell you is that you can ignite yourself and your business because you let what doesn't serve you go. There is more you for you to serve. And that right there is the epitome of business.
It is. Yeah. So, I'd love to dive in because this is also for everybody listening. Like, I always learn so much on these calls, and I also feel like I'm getting personally coached. So,
yeah.
Right. So it's like, there's this aspect of me that still sort of believes that, okay, so I'm me because of who I am, no matter what. But then there's this thing about branding and like being who you are and being unique that's sort of like attached to our possessions, right? Because we're like, okay, if I'm going to be me and be unique, it has to be reflected in my clothes and the things that I have.
And your branding.
And all of that. So I feel like that's sort of a paradox, right? Because it is sort of like attached to the things, but then it's also like not about the things at all.
Right. So here's what I'm going to say about that. And I don't know if this is going to answer, so free to ask after. But you want the things that you have around you, surrounding you, to actually be the directest representation of who you are. And anything else that does not fit that and that is not in alignment with who you are is clutter. It's all clutter. And I know that sounds really like exaggerated, but if you think about it that way, you know, we've heard other successful entrepreneurs talk about their not-do list. They're getting rid of clutter, but when they take projects off of the, you know, hot seat and on the let's do this list, and they put it on the I don't want a list, there is a decluttering, moving the obstacle from what wants to actually happen. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
You did. And I don't even know that I really asked a clear question. So that is amazing. That's perfect. So everything that is a direct representation of you and who you are, both for your business and for your personal life, is what you should keep.
Yes. And the things that make you feel more you, but does not mean more stuff. It means more you. Because, you know, at the beginning of the year, I wrote a newsletter and I was telling people, you know, new year, new you. This is what everybody says. New year, it's just everything's going to be like lickety split and you're going to be a new person just because January 1st happens. No, 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 no. You know, it's like, no, because to me, it means that it's erasing who you already are and what you have already accomplished, calendar year or not. And then I got to thinking, okay, how could I spin this if this were my magazine cover? So it's new year, more you. More you. In every situation, more you. Because the more you that exists, the more you connect, the more you share, the more you create, the more you are you. And if we are talking in spiritual terms, what the world needs is for us to be at our absolute most authentic, truest, you know, rawest self so that we can go do what we need to do here. And that is why I'm so passionate about this, is because it's not about, you know, okay, so your TV's broken, get a new one. No problem. But it's not like, you know, no. And there are times when you go through a huge shift or a process that's cathartic or therapeutic, and you do end up as a new you, and that's okay. But the reason that you've done that is because you've removed what doesn't serve you, and that is the clutter, you know, and it can show up in a karmic relationship, for crying out loud. It doesn't have to be just stuff. It's everywhere. I also want to emphasize that when I talk about this, you know, passionate, uncluttered, like, thing that I do, I want to remind you, I am not talking about sterile. I am not talking about clinical, sterile, devoid of color, minimal. If minimal is your thing and that is what brings you peace, harmony, and joy, go for it. If you like large prints on your curtains and color everywhere, do it. You know, in the KonMari method, she talks about what sparks joy. Before that came along, I just said, what makes you happy? What actually feels good? And if you're going from a Danielle Laporte perspective where you're talking about core desired feelings, what is it about clutter that doesn't allow you to get to those feelings? Do you know what I mean? Is that if your feeling is freedom and you have clutter, you ain't going to get there with clutter. You know, if it's passion and something's dragging you down, making you feel lethargic, as clutter often does. I talk about clutter like it's a person, but seriously,
it's like its own being.
Yeah, it's like this entity, you know, it's like, but really, I don't think it's a bad thing. It's just, I often use the clutter as the guiding force. The clutter is going to tell me what you want to unearth and unblock first. And where will you get the most relief? This is one thing I forgot to mention a while ago when you asked for what should they start with, is what are you going to get the most bang for your relief for immediately? Right away. Is it the kitchen? Is it the, you know, the sock drawer? Is it the folder with the bills? What is it? You know, where are you going to have the most impact the soonest, the fastest?
Beautiful. Great. I'm sure
Yeah.
everybody's like super excited to go
Go get
dive into
other people. Go
something.
do it. Go do it.
I'm all ready to make my list. That's awesome.
Uh-huh.
So where can people find more Sophia?
They can find me at alifeuncluttered.com. I also have a blog on HuffPost, so there's a link on my website to that, and I do a newsletter about once or twice a month called Cut the Clutter, and on my Facebook page. So there's lots of places to find me.
Lots of places.
And if you are not in Houston, Texas, worry not. I can still work with you. If you have a webcam and a way to speak into a microphone, we can get this done.
Love it.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And you definitely give all of us a lot to think about. And
thank you for having me.
Right?
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching this Soulpreneur Session edition of Soulfire TV. We'd love to have you join us in the conversation over in the Soulfire Mastermind, a free private Facebook group full of support for you and your business. The link is on the screen. And I will see you in the next episode.